It's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, and that is the CEO of NTT Data, Abhijit Dubey. Mr. Dubey is the president and CEO of NTT Data, which is an $18 billion global leader in business and technology services and digital and AI infrastructure. He joined NTT in February 2021, where he was previously at McKinsey & Company as a senior partner and a core leader of the global tech, media, and telecom practice. He's going to talk to us about what's going on in the world of AI and how NTT is implementing that both internally and on behalf of customers. So please join me in a very warm welcome for Mr. Dubey.
So let me start with a little bit of Greek mythology for you. Anybody an expert on Greek mythology? No? Okay, good. So Phaethon, he was the mortal son of Helios, who was the sun god in Greek mythology. And Phaethon was taunted for claiming Helios as his father. Seeking proof of his parentage, Phaethon asked his father for a favor. And Helios promised him, "You can have anything." So Phaethon requested him to let him drive his chariot. Although Helios knew that his mortal son lacked the strength and the skill to control the horses, the promise had been made. With dread, Helios handed over the reins. As Phaethon took the reins, he immediately lost control of the horses. They veered wildly, scorching and freezing the earth in places and causing widespread destruction. Stepped in Zeus, the king of the gods. He intervened, striking the chariot with a thunderbolt. Phaethon fell to his death, and the world was saved from further devastation. What's the moral of the story? Never summon a power you cannot control. We stand on the brink of a technological revolution that will redefine our world. AI holds immense promise to drive innovation, enhance productivity, and improve lives. But with great power comes profound responsibility. And how we harness this technology today will shape our society for generations to come. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Abhijit Dubey. I'm the CEO of NTT Data Inc., and it's a privilege to be here with you. I'm here to represent the NTT Group, which is a $100 billion plus technology conglomerate, Japanese-based. And some of you may or may not know it's the 8th largest tech company in the world. Let me spend a few minutes on the impact of AI, which probably most of you know about. It has incredible potential to reshape our businesses, our societies, and our daily lives. It is projected to have a GDP impact of $4 to $6 trillion globally. Just as a calibration point, that's the GDP of Japan today. So we could create an entirely new economy the size of Japan just from AI. It has the potential to do a lot of good. For example, a massive step-up increase in labor productivity, which has been challenging in the last several decades. It can be a panacea for the demographic challenges that many of the developed world has today. But most importantly, something dear to me is it enables, or has the potential to enable, significantly better access to and outcomes for healthcare and education for kids in underserved communities and countries in the world. And as we all know, healthcare and education outcomes for kids is the #1 driver for economic development. The list goes on. Venture capital funding in AI since 2023, so not even 2 years, has crossed $40 billion. The private sector demand, I think Wendy was here, she mentioned this as well. The private sector demand for AI is only accelerated over the last 12 months. According to some research that we've just done, about 97% of CEOs believe AI will have a material impact on their business, and a full 99% of them are planning significantly increased investments in AI in 2025. But at the same time, AI is poised to drive a 160% increase in data center power demand by 2030, which means it will most likely double the carbon dioxide emissions coming from data centers. The more startling statistic, perhaps, is that by 2027, based on current consumption, freshwater supply equivalent to 50% of the UK's freshwater supply could be exhausted to cool AI data centers. As well, globally, trust in AI companies has dropped to 53% from 61% 5 years ago. So the question before us is absolutely urgent. How do we unlock AI's potential without compromising our planet, our societies, and our communities? The future demands action and bold action in 3 areas. Number 1, sustainability and innovation in harmony. AI must drive progress without damaging our environment. This is not optional, it's essential. Second, ethics at the core. We must create AI systems that enhance society, uphold fairness, and safeguard public trust. Trustworthy AI is not just a goal, it's the foundation for equitable access and widespread benefits. And finally, privacy and security. Protecting sensitive data, mitigating risks of misuse, and ensuring strong and transparent governance is vital for fostering confidence and enabling responsible innovation. So what are we as NTT Group doing to lead the way in our approach for responsible AI? So shortly after ChatGPT was launched in late 2022, there were a lot of valid concerns that rose about using generative AI safely and responsibly. There were questions around bias, questions around copyright, around intellectual property, ensuring focus on social good, transparency in the access and control and training of the data. As NTT Group, we shared in that excitement as well, but we also acknowledged the importance of establishing guidelines to prevent negative outcomes. Let me take you back to a philosophy that guides Japan Inc. today. It started 300 years ago under the Edo era, where there was a very successful merchant class called the Omi Shonen. And they became very successful traveling all across Japan based on a very simple business philosophy, which was called Sanpo Yoshi. Literally translated into English, what that means is good 3 ways. Good for buyer, good for the supplier, and good for society. That ethos is embedded into the fabric of Japan Inc. and NTT as a company within that space. The NTT AI Charter is the backbone of this commitment, and it's grounded in 6 core principles that guide us and all of our employees and all of our engineers, all 350,000 of them globally, in everything that we do related to AI. So the 6 principles are the following. Number 1, sustainable development. AI should benefit people, society, and the environment, and respect global norms while promoting sustainable progress. Number 2, human autonomy. AI should support, not override, human decisions. And respect for individual rights and diversity remains absolutely critical. Number 3, fairness and openness. Transparent algorithms with minimized biases ensure fairness and ethical AI development. Number 4, security. Robust measures should safeguard AI systems from threats throughout their life cycle. Number 5, privacy. Personal data management follows strict privacy protocols to build user trust. And number 6, communication and co-creation, which is about open collaboration with all stakeholders to drive trustworthy AI innovations. So just to recap, the 6 principles that guide us in everything we do around AI: sustainable development, human autonomy, fairness and openness, security, privacy, communication, and co-creation. But it's not enough to just have principles. We've translated these principles into tangible actions across 4 different areas so that we can embed this into our business and our operations. The 4 areas are, number 1, what we call responsible by design innovation, which means that any innovation that we do has to be responsible by design. And responsible means it's got to be trusted, it's got to be secure, it's got to be ethical, and it's got to be sustainable. Number 2, upskilling at scale. How do we drive 350,000 of our employees and upskill them in this new world of AI? Number 3, a multi-layered governance approach of how we approach and manage risk. And number 4, stakeholder collaboration for a global framework, a lot of what the previous panel talked about. So let me delve a little bit into detail for each one of them. Responsible innovation. As we know, environmental impact is one of the most pressing challenges in AI. The power and freshwater consumption that I described of AI-driven data centers are projected to skyrocket, and carbon emissions will follow suit. So what are we doing as NTT? We are the world's 3rd largest data center provider in the world. So we are investing in renewable and nuclear energy to power all of our data centers. We are also implementing innovative cooling technologies to reduce the demand for power. Second, we're building efficient language models. So our own large language or medium language model is called Suzumi in Japan. It's a very lightweight model. As a comparison, it's got about 0.6 to 0.7 billion parameters. OpenAI has probably trillion plus, as an example. But it's a very power-efficient model that delivers quite impressive performance while consuming a fraction of the power. And then finally, through an initiative, what we call IOWN, Innovative Optical and Wireless Network, and I think the Japanese ambassador who was here before referred to it, we've been investing heavily in research and development and deployment of new technologies to transition data transmission in networks and computing from all electronics to all photonics. So again, all electronics to all photonics. And if we can do that at scale, that will dramatically reduce the power consumption of communications, of data centers, and computing devices. And at the same time, it'll also address the need for AI for ultra-low latency and high capacity. So we can deliver very sustainable AI infrastructure for the future. At the same time, we're also ensuring that all of our AI development meets not only the security and privacy standards, but remains transparent, fair, and ethical. To deliver on this, in all of our AI development and deployment, we ensure critical aspects such as zero trust security, data privacy, and inclusive, free of bias, and explainable algorithms, amongst others. We also ensure that our technology is as democratic as possible. So for example, the model Suzumi that I described, due to its lightweight nature, is actually accessible very easily to small businesses and nonprofits. The other thing that we do recognize is that current laws are only part of the solution for responsible AI governance. And to truly lead as an organization, we must go beyond the legal requirements and value ethics and social acceptability in everything we do. The second tangible action that we're doing is around upskilling our people. We have launched extensive programs to ensure that every single one of our 350,000 employees are aware of this new technology, not only the promise and the potential, but also the risks and responsibilities that comes with that. So what we've done is we've built persona-based training. If you're a salesperson, you're a finance person, you're a delivery person. We ensure that people who are developing and deploying these technologies, they're all appropriately trained and enabled to ensure the security, privacy, and ethical aspects of AI. The third is the multi-layered governance approach to risk management. And we understand that there's a very systematic approach that we need to put in place to be confident that the principles we've described are actually adhered to at all times. without exception. So we've implemented a proactive risk management approach, ensuring that we stay competitive with AI technology, we adhere to the legal regulations, and we maintain a responsible and reputable deployment of AI. So how does this look in practice? Every single AI project undergoes a thorough review by the project manager and the company's AI risk management officer. Each project is then categorized into one of three levels: prohibit, i.e. you cannot continue; high risk, there's a set of remediation actions you got to take; and limited risk. And each one of them has a very tailored set of actions that needs to happen once a project is identified as such. We combine this with what we call our agile dual loop governance that engages both the management and the frontline teams to proactively assess risks, impact, implement improvements, and stay aligned with the standards that we have put for ourselves. And finally, collaborating with a broad set of stakeholders for a global framework. I think the previous panel described it as well. Our belief is that AI will transcend borders, it'll transcend industries, it's going to transcend governments. No single entity can ensure its responsible use. So that's why we are taking a very proactive approach to forging partnerships worldwide, whether that's governments, academic organizations like the Harvard Center for Brain Science, global initiatives like the G7 Hiroshima AI process, and the World Economic Forum AI Governance Alliance, all of which we're contributing to establish global AI standards that respect cultural, legal, and ethical nuances of individual nations. If there were a call to action for all of us here, as I look to the future, I see a world that's guided by a philosophy of what I describe as responsible reinvention. I actually lived in Silicon Valley for 20 plus years when the internet was just starting, and AI feels like deja vu. Now being part of a Japanese company with its philosophy of Sanpo Yoshi, it's a very interesting combination of East meets West. And this is the philosophy that guides us, this notion of responsible reinvention, where technology and responsibility are inseparable. From our point of view, we would advocate for the following in terms of responsible AI. Number one, we must unite to design and implement globally consistent agreements and laws that protect intellectual property and copyright. Policymakers must strengthen copyright protections and establish international agreements to combat artistic piracy, deepfakes, and other fraudulent activities, ensuring that creators' intellectual property is protected worldwide. Equally important is the need to safeguard the confidentiality of AI developers. Protecting sensitive information such as proprietary algorithms, training data, and intellectual property is critical to fostering innovation and maintaining competitive integrity. Second, we have to recognize that not everything can be codified into law. Therefore, we should aim for a minimum level of global agreement on key regulatory and ethical standards. We must ensure that all of our AI development and deployment meet not only the laws and global agreements, but go beyond that in terms of safety, trustworthiness, and democratization. And lastly, we must act collaboratively to ensure minimum impact of AI on the environment. This could include standardized measurements to measure impact, use of renewable energy, and application of energy-efficient standards in infrastructure, development, deployment, and usage of AI. At NTT, we are deeply committed to this journey. We invite all of you, industrial leaders, policymakers, media, political leaders, and visionaries, to join us in championing a balanced approach to innovation that prioritizes responsibility alongside progress. So in closing, this is our movement to lead with vision, with integrity, and with courage. Together, we can shape a future where AI can drive progress, drive our planet, protect our planet, improve lives, and empowers every community. So let us build a world where technology works not just for us, but with us, amplifying our potential while upholding our shared humanity. Thank you very much.
Come on up, gentlemen. I'm on stage left, so fill in here. All right. Masa, go ahead and you can alight here and come on up. Thank you, Mr. Dubé, for those inspiring words and a very interesting presentation of NTT's ideas and ideals in this context. I was troubled listening to him, particularly in the part about the smaller, high-quality models. I'm thinking, maybe I'm being wasteful when I'm asking, GPT-01 if I can substitute marjoram for oregano. Like, I might need to find some ways to economize in my own life. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Joseph Mikett. I'm the director of the Energy Security and Climate Change Program here at CSIS. I'm here to moderate a panel of experts on how we're going to do this sustainably. So much of this conversation seems to end at energy. They actually brought me down from my desk to see if we could help address these challenges. And we've worked closely with Greg's team and a lot of our friends here at CSIS trying to investigate these challenges and see what solutions we can bring to bear on an obvious national challenge and a global challenge. But I'm really excited today to have a conversation with these three panelists who bring a variety of expertise, I think addressing a lot of the issues that we just heard about. On the far end, Dr. Masahi Kawashima is the IOWN Technology Director at NTT, at the heart of a lot of the innovations for how we innovate in the open and bring about technology solutions to some of the impact challenges associated with AI. In the center is Travis Hall, Acting Associate Director for the National Telecommunications and Information Administration at the Department of Commerce. And immediately to my left is Keith Benish, a Senior Advisor at the Department of Energy. So we've got energy perspectives, we've got global governance and competitiveness perspectives, and we've got the science perspectives in this conversation as well. I'd like to begin offering each of you a few minutes to reflect upon the big topics here. How do we create, let me say create, a future of sustainable energy to support AI from the perspective you bring to this conversation? How do we unlock the finance, the technology, the supply chains, the energy necessary? What's the role of tech innovation? In particular, how do we make sure tech innovation is broadly shared, but also globally governed? And then lastly, what is the role of openness? How do we create openness in a world where the economic stakes demand that there also be competition? So Masa, let me begin with you. We've just heard from Mr. Dubé about all the work that NTT is doing on the innovation side. I'd love for you to spend a few minutes describing your efforts and what you hope to achieve.
Okay, so we started our R&D effort called IOWN, Innovative Optical and Wireless Network, because the world cannot remain sustainable with today's network and computing technology. So the recent rapid growth of AI is making the situation worse. So in IOWN, we are trying to redesign the network and computing infrastructure to make them much more energy efficient, leveraging the evolution of optical device technologies. And as many companies have shown strong interest in our idea, we established a global open community called IOWN Global Forum. And almost all of the influential companies, such as Google, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Intel, have joined the IOWN Global Forum, and the current number of memberships is around 150. And let me explain our new networking concept called All Photonics Network, APN, which will make data centers more sustainable. And this is a good example of how we leverage the evolution of optical device technologies. So the optical transceivers used for high capacity, long distance communication used to be very large standalone systems. So we had to deploy them in carriers' large buildings. But thanks to the evolution of optical device technologies, the transceivers have become so small that they can be directly installed into customers' routers in customers' premises. So we can now have customer routers directly exchange optical signals without requiring electronic repeater in the infrastructure. So the infrastructure would only have to provide optical channels. So this concept is called All Photonics Network, APN. Speaking in analogy with trips with airplanes, sending data over APN is like making a trip on a direct flight. On the other hand, sending data over traditional packet networks is making a trip with many connected flights. So of course, the data communication over APN is much more energy efficient and with very low latency. And APN is just one example of IOWN's activity. We are also developing new distributed computing platform that can take full advantage of APN's high bandwidth and low latency connections. So ultimately, IOWN will create new network and computing infrastructure that can streamline data transferring and data processing at light speed.
May I ask just a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So, you've got a data center, right? It's got racks of chips. They're computing away.
Yeah.
They produce data. And the technology you're talking about is within that data center, within a campus, or allows this infrastructure to communicate across long distances?
Yes, that is the point. So in this way, IOWN will create new norm of data centers. So today, we deploy hyperscale data centers in a limited number of small areas, such as IOWN. But with IOWN's light-speed distributed computing, we don't have to do that. Instead, we can distribute small data centers and interconnect them into one computing zone. And this will enable us to operate each data center with locally available renewable energy. So in conclusion, to make sustainable AI infrastructure, we use silicon photonics in two ways. The first way is, of course, to develop high energy, highly efficient computing platform. But the second way, which I think is more important, is to geographically distribute energy demands. In other words, to flatten the energy demand density, megawatt per square miles. So these are two ways of making sustainable AI infrastructure. This is IOWN's way of achieving sustainability.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I heard three things in there that I think I'd love to amplify just momentarily. One, there's a new technology. I liked your analogy very much, direct flights as opposed to the networked flights. I was also thinking about those, you used to watch old movies about the Navy, right? They're sending optical signals to each other, and they have to have an intermediary interpreting those for the captain, and instead the captains can talk to each other. You take out intermediary steps, and that improves efficiency and timeliness. I also hear openness. Multiple companies committed to being part of this network, trying to resolve this issue. And then I hear a different topology of what the data center fleet or data center infrastructure may look like enabled by this technology. So we've heard or all read about 5 gigawatt data centers. And you think from the perspective of a utility manager, a high capacity 5 gigawatt load is an abject nightmare. But if we can spread those around, if they can communicate faster, then perhaps they don't need to be all so heavily loaded. With that in mind, I would love to turn to Keith. Keith is at the Department of Energy, so you're thinking through with your colleagues sort of how do we attack this challenge from the energy perspective? So I'd love to hear an update from you on the work the DOE is doing. You're at the heart of the US government effort on research in these areas. You're looking at how we pragmatically do this. And then lastly, I'd love to hear your thoughts on AI as a way to resolve some of these challenges, right? Here in the United States, we hear a lot about permitting issues. And those exist for large infrastructure, they exist for small infrastructure. I know you've been working on how AI can help address that. Please join the conversation.
Sure, thank you. And thank you for the opening, picking up on that first point, the last point you were making about the geographic distribution, right? That is one of the key challenges of hooking up these data centers, is that sort of, a 1 gigawatt or a 5 gigawatt point source load is that's just really difficult to
literally
supply.
Keeps executives up at night.
It's literally, and relatively unprecedented, right? If you think of the largest single point loads that we've had historically, I think the largest ones, there might have been an aluminum smelter, or some still operate that are like around 800 megawatts. And so suddenly we've gone stampeding past that. What that means for infrastructure is that you need not just that electricity supply, you need the generation sources, you need those connections, transmission lines, very difficult to build. You think again of a 1 gigawatt to 5 gigawatt data center, you're talking about like multiple 500 kV transmission lines, each one of which historically has taken maybe 10 years to permit. So among the various things that we're doing at the Department of Energy, because you started out mentioning the permitting, we have a project that we've put together with national labs that's exploring AI use cases in developing AI tools to improve permitting processes. We've started with National Environmental Policy Act and related reviews that go on with that, Endangered Species Act, Clean Water Act, and are building out these sorts of tools by first hoovering up all the data that we can from other federal agencies from their past reviews, doing some fine tuning and training some of our own language models that can work best in that environment. And now we're at the process of beta testing with NEPA reviewers and are soon going to be expanding across the federal family of agencies. Where our project, branded overall the Voltaic Initiative. Our project is, as far as I know, the first where federal agencies are cooperate to be able to provide Gen AI tools to other agencies. And so we're also at the forefront of figuring out the safety, the security, the ethical requirements, the responsible use, and sort of in process. In addition to that permitting specific work, there's a large group at the Department of Energy and other agencies trying to figure out how to help conquer some of these near-term challenges of obtaining, renewable energy, or, for many of them, just energy,
right,
in a timely fashion. And so that's where, and this is where I have a list from my colleagues, because I have the items that I need to make sure that I hit the key points on this.
Well, you don't want to leave anybody out.
Well, I don't want to leave anybody out in my thank you at the Oscars.
Right.
That I do. But the sort of several key initiatives of that current work. One is around innovative tariffs and helping, across utilities, ISOs, RTOs, state utilities commissions, helping bring more information and more insight into how we can reform the tariffs that we do that will enable the investments necessary to meet the needs of these large data centers while protecting the other ratepayers, right? Because one of the things that we've already seen happen with the data center development to date, and what has led to some conflict out in rate cases like in AEP Ohio, is people have signed up for large loads. They've made those connections. They've made the investments. The demand has not come up for electricity as rapidly as they projected.
Right.
So now if that, so suddenly you start to face where, okay, well, if they're not paying for all that electricity, it starts to impact other ratepayers. So we're helping to try and work through that. Also, the standard DOE work that we do, helping commercialize next generation technologies, right? So more in that 5 to 7 year time frame, investments in geothermal, investments in SMRs, investments in additional AI technologies that can help with things like interconnection processes and interconnection studies. And there's work across labs and being funded from people like the Grid Deployment Office has recently put out a $30 million solicitation for companies to put together consortia to work on AI tools that can accelerate parts of the interconnection process. Another area big for research and working with the developers is that sort of flexibility in the AI data centers, right? It's one thing to meet the load, the average load all the time. It's that particularly expensive to meet at those sort of peak demand periods.
Right.
Traditionally, the data centers are like, we need 90% of capacity all the time. And so it's really trying to work through those issues of like, okay, what can you do in terms of behind the meter storage or innovative ways of operating the data center that still meet your commercial needs, but are where you become an asset to the grid of sort of shaving some of that peak load,
right.
And helping it operate. And then another one, like more small-bore and specific, is leveraging energy communities and the sort of extra tax credits and bonus adders that are there. And so we're working directly with several developers trying to identify like former coal power plant sites that have the substation and the interconnection infrastructure and this underutilized and brownfield area that they can come in and help fund the remediation, help establish the data center, and bring some economic activity to those communities. And then there is also, a wide variety of that more basic scientific research also about chips design. Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy is leading a consortium across companies trying to, keep that pace going that we've experienced traditionally with Moore's Law now that's running out, but starting to, how do we do that for the next decade? So, I could go on, but I will stop there.
No. So what I hear is a full spectrum approach, right? You're starting from how do we resolve challenges on the supply side, all the way down to how do we make fundamental innovations to reduce energy use, or I would say assume other environmental
semiconductor design or design of transformers or the sorts of efforts that NTT is leading.
Excellent. Thank you so much. One of the funniest things about this conversation is I can think about chips and imagine them as like a highly competitive space, right? They're kind of sexy. It's like, oh man, we got the fastest chips. We can do the coolest algorithms. A data center is a very plain object, right? Yeah. A windowless building, anonymous from the public, usually not in view, and yet it is like one of the most important pieces of economic infrastructure that countries are investing in presently. Which brings me to Travis. Travis, you're at NTIA, you're at the Commerce Department. It's your job to help think through how does the US win this competitive war, but how do we do it fairly and with standards of open competition? In September, your group released an RFI on data center growth. How do we actually meet this need? We've all read the headlines. There are thoughts about whether or not we're in a bubble, whether a lot of that demand is going to be realized, but objectively, we're on a building spree when it comes to data centers. What were you hoping to achieve, hearing from the public and from firms? And can you give us a sense of what the early responses have been?
Yeah, sure. So for those of you who are not familiar with NTIA, with the National Telecommunication Information Administration, as you said, a part of the Department of Commerce, we do a lot of different things, including managing federal spectrum. We're in charge of the broadband grants. Where I'm kind of like way in is we're also charged with being the president's principal advisor on telecommunications and information policy. And that, with both the telecommunications and the information piece, that includes things like artificial intelligence. And so we have had a broad range of activities on this, where we kind of a little bit of the administration's think tank on these issues. So we've already come out in the last year with 2 reports on artificial intelligence, on openness in AI, particularly dual-use foundation models, on accountability and AI, particularly trying to build up the accountability ecosystem. And in the past, we've done reports on kind of more landscape reports, like on the landscape of IoT or on specific topic issues like privacy or cybersecurity. So this particular effort's a bit in that kind of like landscape kind of genre, where we're taking a bit of a holistic view of the data center ecosystem, what the hurdles are, what needs to happen, where a lot of the puns always intended energy is, right? And in terms of like the comment period did already close, and so all the comments are actually actively public right now on regulations.gov. But just in terms of what folks are thinking about and talking about, it isn't terribly surprising, right? Energy is absolutely one of the top areas where people are thinking about. Permitting is one of the other areas that people are seeing as areas of concern. But also folks are looking at issues of workforce and workforce development. and cybersecurity practices, right? Cybersecurity practices, privacy practices, things around the data centers themselves. And one thing that I would like to just simply add on, which to the first presentation, is also the data centers aren't just AI. Right? The data centers are, to your point about everybody's building out data centers and data center infrastructure, data centers are also a key component of internet infrastructure, right? Of ensuring that folks have access to, non-AI data, to have low latency, to all of these different things where with the efforts to build out broadband access, we are in charge of trying to ensure, that we have internet for all, right? That also necessitates a build out of data center infrastructure, perhaps of a different sort, right? But still requires that. And one piece that I would also add that I think was a little bit in the comments, but also just on the question around sustainability, is there is also that aspect of sustainability that is resilience, right? Where a lot of the issues and concerns that we're already seeing in the internet infrastructure is the resilience of these systems, of the ability to withstand outages, withstand disruptions, such that these, understanding that there's peak and there's things like that, but with internet, you kind of want it to be constantly on, right? Because if your data center goes down, it doesn't mean that the internet stops, it means it gets routed through other areas, and so there is that kind of question around data centers as well in terms of how do you build towards resilience. And so just again, with the perspective that we have at NTIA of kind of the ecosystem-wide, data centers are not just the big ones, right? Yeah. There's also all the other ones, and to your point, there is the need to build out the communication to and from. Certainly, the big, massive ones that are just really focused on training the foundation models are those big ones, right? But there's an entire infrastructure that's necessary to support that is necessary to ensure the resilience of that model once created can actually be accessed. So there is a lot at stake in addition to just simply the big hyperscaler model of data center.
Excellent. Colleagues in the room, I get to take moderator's prerogative and ask a couple questions to see if I can draw some threads out here. But please do be thinking about questions that you've got for your panel. We'll have an open question period starting in about 5-6 minutes. Travis, returning to you, you talked a little bit about workforce and workforce development. What does that mean, right? So is it highly skilled, AI engineers? Is it data center designers? Is it construction work? Like, what is the workforce development challenge that you think is most primary here, or opportunity?
Well, this is not my full area of expertise, right? Cool. But so grains of salt or pitchers, regardless.
I was going to ask you about algorithmic efficiency in trading frontier models. Would you prefer that?
Well, I mean, but in terms of data centers, right? There is absolutely. I would say, from my understanding, there's two challenges. It's a twofold challenge. One is that there is a challenge of high-level expertise, right? Where we are going to need more skilled folks. I mean, where some of these jobs are getting fewer but more specialized, right? And that there is going to be, as these things scale up, right, there is going to be a greater need for folks with really specialized high training. Yeah. The other side of it is a reskilling and retraining of the workforce that is less skilled but is in support roles.
Like we heard about energy communities and the energy tax credits available in those places. Oftentimes this can be a retraining opportunity.
Well, and also just simply like thinking through the folks who are responsible for maintenance of systems, but that maintenance of the system is now is managed by algorithmic systems, or that these systems are being constantly renewed, and there is a need for reskilling and retraining even on the lower end of the scale, and some possible disruptions of those of traditionally held jobs. So I think that there is kind of a dual aspect of that, where there is a constant need for folks for highly trained, computer scientists, others on this, and the demand is just growing, right? But then there is also a greater disruption that we are seeing in the workforce writ large that is going to affect this industry as well.
Yeah. Masa, I see you nodding your head. You're close to the technology innovation piece of this question. Maybe you could help us think through kind of how technology, workforce can help meet these broader challenges.
Of course, regarding workforce problems, if you run tens of thousands of GPU servers every day, you have to fix somewhere.
Right.
So that's why we need workforce, and this is one of the reasons why data center. It is difficult to distribute data centers, even if we have high-speed connections. But I think there are many technology areas. Of course, we can develop AI technologies. So the autonomous driving of computing infrastructure is one of the area that we are exploring. And also there are a lot of technologies such as drones and so on, so that we can reduce the workforce we need. And of course, for difficult jobs like software maintenance and so on, basically the high-skilled engineers can maintain the servers remotely.
Right.
So what we need to deploy in the proximity to data centers is basically more low-skilled engineers to fix the hardware. But we can reduce the workforce with AI and so on.
Got it. Excellent. So we can pursue efficiency. I mean, presumably these are very valuable pieces of infrastructure. Companies want to keep them operating at a high standard or a high capacity, and they're probably willing to pay a workforce to make sure that that happens, right? Masa, you said something which challenged me a little bit, so I want to hear your thoughts on it. Maybe we can get reactions from our co-panelists too. That the world cannot be sustainable with today's network infrastructure. Cannot is a strong statement. Can you help us think through a little bit on what you mean, and then I'd love to hear the panelists think through how do we actually meet this challenge?
Well, for example, of course, we want high-speed, faster computers and faster switches. Broadcom releases high-capacity switches every 2 years. And to keep up with that speed, we have to keep replacing switches every 2 years.
Yep.
Do you think that this is sustainable, the world is sustainable with this product life cycle? This is also the case with GPU. NVIDIA releases GPU every year, and we keep up with these product releases. Do you think that the world would be sustainable with such short product life cycle? So this is one of the examples that today technology is making progress very rapidly, and we replace products every year just to increase the capacity. So that's very inefficient. This is one of the examples. There are a lot of reasons that the world cannot sustain.
Well, maybe we can also turn to Keith, because one of the things I've observed in these conversations, we talk a lot about innovation, tech innovation, efficiency, data center design, chipset efficiency. Invariably, the conversation returns to supply side electricity generation. Nuclear, advanced nuclear. In the United States, will we use gas to power these things? How are you viewing, how do you view that cascade to the supply side? And how does that affect the question of can we do this sustainably? The cascade to the supply side is massive, right? As we talked about, and picking back up on the geographic distribution that I was just thinking of a little more as you were talking about. One of the ways it's not sustainable is that geographic distribution
really enables a more resilient system and makes it more obvious what is actually, clarifies what's actually going on,
right.
Which is that to be sustainable and to be reliable and resilient enough, these centers are needed sort of all of the above approach.
Yep.
That is not just, that you want to connect to the renewables, but also that, trying to just locate behind the meter at a single nuclear plant or bring in, your gigawatt of generation of natural gas plants on site isn't really a long-term viable solution because of the resilience and the reliability. Like, we need these to be connected and interconnected on the grid. That's how we supply. It's similar to what we were talking about of the way the internet finds the workarounds of the choke points or if one piece fails. We need that kind of system for the electricity system.
We don't want a down turbine preventing me from substituting marjoram for oregano.
Absolutely, that would be a catastrophe if that happened. I think we all can agree on that. And so it does, whether or not that's distributed or not, it does need that interconnection and in small I interconnection, not the actual process, but of just so that you can turn on those supplies, ramp up to meet demand, bring it from another part of the country, bring it from the plains in the Midwest when the wind is blowing. And that's, I think that both from a policy side and in the industry side with companies, I think we're just starting to get our hands around what it means when you talk about single loads that are this large and how you actually supply that reliably over time.
Great. Travis, well, let's give you final word on this question of can't and must do sustainably while we have our runner find our first questioner from the audience.
I mean, it's an interesting question of can't or won't, right? Because we can hit limits, right? Like, we absolutely can hit limits where things aren't as functional or as efficient or as as sustainable. I think one of the interesting questions that you kind of threw at me, or in the intro threw at me in the beginning, is is that in the U.S. or is that globally? Right. And because those are not necessarily the same thing of, are we able to, do we hit limits here while others are not? Or conversely, is that just a global sustainability limit and where things are not, where the possible of what we currently conceive is not until we get better.
Right. Question from the audience. Yes, sir. Please stand and announce yourself and where you're from, and kindly remember that a question has a brief propositional statement and a sentence which goes up at the end.
My name is Ujjwala Palluri. I'm a private citizen, and my question is, given rising instability, food insecurity in Africa, for example, and political instability, what steps can we take to secure the critical mineral and resource supply chains that are fundamental to, for example, constructing more data centers, to keeping sure we keep the production of chips going?
Travis or Keith, Masa, have you had any thoughts on this? The question being sort of, how do we maintain a secure supply chain outside of energy, in particular with reference to critical minerals and the security of those things?
So I'll take a stab at that and just simply say that is, to Masa's point earlier, right, about the continued renewal and constant renewal of GPUs and replacement of these things, that critical minerals is an aspect of the supply chain and the sustainability of data centers, of AI, and of the IT ecosystem. I will claim even less expertise on the steps being taken. I do want to say that the U.S. government has work streams on that and is thinking very hard and has people who are experts on it who are thinking about and working on those issues. But I can't claim any particular insights that I could give you or answers.
I'm happy to say that our colleagues in the project of critical mineral security here at CSIS have also recently published a paper on the critical mineral needs for the semiconductor industry, which is at least a small part of this overall issue. A second question from the audience, if we may. We've got a couple more minutes. We should make that guy ask a question. Let me voice one more then. You have all been working on this for years, and a lot of what we talk about in the context of energy supply, chips demand, financing forecasts, pauses around 2030. And so I'd love to hear each of your views on, are we going to be talking about the same challenges in 2030 that we're talking about today, where we're talking about 50 gigawatts of data center demand in the ante room? Are we going to be thinking then about 250? Like, how do you think the scaling of this is really going to work? And I'm inviting here your private editorial opinion. This is very much a future-based question. Masa, your thoughts?
Well, so I'm hoping with IOWN, basically, we don't have to discuss gigawatt data centers. Instead, probably we would be we hope that the data center issue should be solved with the approach of decentralization of data centers. That's our hope.
Okay, yeah. I hear that.
I have to tread carefully because my own thoughts are not necessarily...
Those of the Department of Energy, I understand.
Yeah, exactly, or anybody else for that matter. But I think that what we're going to know a lot more in maybe 6 to 9 months about that trajectory.
Well, what should we watch what should our audience watch to discern that question, even without soliciting a call from you?
So the scaling that got us from GPT-2 level models, so 2019 range, to GPT-4 2022 range, each GPT level is about 100 times more compute than the previous one. So GPT-2 to GPT-3, 100 to GPT-4.
You just need, that's how many floating point operations one must do.
Floating point operations to do, right? So that GPT-4 improvement, all right, it's 10,000 times more.
Yep.
That, and a little less than that actual energy use because there's improvements in efficiency. And the question has been, since GPT-4 came out, where's GPT-5?
Yep.
Right, or from anybody. And we seem to have hit this plateau around that sort of functionality around what we think of as GPT-4, with O1 being a kind of different animal because of what they're doing. So right now, the question starts to be, well, where's GPT-5, right? We went from, in about 3 years, from 2 to 4, and we're now about 2 years on from GPT-4, and no sign of GPT-5. Is this scale, and if the scale we're continuing to hold, figure it takes a while for people to get their, additional GPUs and figure out more data. But we've just started recently to hear some reports of, reported out from the large hyperscaler frontier model developers that maybe the scaling alone is not producing the same kinds of improvements as they've tried to do this next one. So in the next 6 to 9 months, if we don't have something that's a GPT-5 that was produced because they scaled another 100 times, that starts to look like a very different outlook for the total energy use. Because right now, the chips folks are ordering and the amount of data center announcements are sort of consistent with continuing on that path of every couple of years, 100 times more compute.
With the frontier lab saying it is worth it for us to invest in 10x, 100x compute, because that is going to realize a model which is better, more economically versatile.
And if they get through this next 100x compute, which should be sometime based on just press reporting in the next 6 to 9 months, and it doesn't have that kind of jump, then I think a lot of people are going to have to figure out if it's on this pace, is it on a slower pace, is there different architectures that aren't, part of it is that the deep learning models that large language models are based on, we're like incredibly compute and energy intensive, even compared to other AI models. So if it's not being done just by scale, then maybe these energy needs are not realized in the near term in the same way.
Excellent. And Travis, any closing thoughts from, we have time, don't be shy. Let's, the lady in the back row here.
Hello, my name is Nitisha Tripathi. I am associated with the DC-based nonprofit MetroLab Network. We work on AI policy with local governments. My question is more regarding the regulatory landscape as far as data centers and the issue of sustainability is concerned. how do you see that evolving? Especially lately, there's been a lot of conversation around focusing on low carbon sources for procuring electricity, for instance, for data centers. So how do you see this conversation evolving in the future? Any particular areas that you think need more attention and haven't received so far?
Yeah, so regularly, Travis, maybe that's one for you. Kind of, how do you see the kind of conversation ongoing after the RFI report after the responses are distilled, they're fed into LLMs and summarized and then reported out? What do you think are going to be the key issues for us to pay attention to?
Sure. Well, first, it's nice that you think that government folks have LLMs that we can outsource stuff to. So in terms of next steps, we are in the U.S. government facing an administration transition. Yeah. So we are actively distilling the comments. We're hoping to have some public discussion of what we found. But a lot of it will depend on incoming political leadership and where they want to take it. We, of course, I will note that this issue is not going away. Right, and I'm sure that the current administration is going to continue to work on it. The incoming administration, I'm sure, will be picking it up very quickly. In terms of what the priorities are going to be, it isn't clear at the moment. However, again, just simply from the comments, energy, permitting, privacy, security, workforce issues, all these fundamentals of building out, I think, are going to be topics that are going to need to be addressed.
And many policy issues, of course, fall outside what the administration is going to do. We are already hearing from the Hill; they want a hand in this. Of course, they do. And state governments, utility commissions are dealing with these large load issues. How do you pay for that? How do you build it? So my expectation is if this technology lives up to its promise, it's a policy area for all of us to pay attention to over the coming years. Colleagues, I regret to say that we're out of time, and I hope you've learned as much from this conversation as I have. For those who are joining us online, we're going to take a brief break to reset the stage for the second session, so please stand by for the next few minutes. Those in the room, same instruction applies. But before we do that, your warm thanks to my panel.